Yeah. Quick question, everyone. Can you hear me at the back as well? All right. Perfect. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all keeping well. It's good to see so many people here, especially when I entered today, I got myself a nice line experience at the entrance as well. So the moment that happens, it's gonna be good because there are a lot of people, and you. I think at that point, there's gonna be a lot of amazing participation. So thank you so much to everyone for being here. Um, yeah. So I am Aditya. I currently work as a developer advocate at AppRight, which is an open source backend as a service platform. I am a Microsoft MVP as well for the developer technologies category. Have spent a bit of time working with .NET and Azure among other platforms, and I do like to work within open source, work on my own projects, a lot of indie projects, and so on right now. And throughout this journey, I tried a few different technologies, but a couple of my favorite ones are .NET MAUI and Azure Cognitive Services. So I thought, considering we've got Global Azure here, why not maybe take the stage to talk about these? Quick question for everyone, if you can just raise your hands once. How many of you know what .NET MAUI is? Okay, couple of people. Nice. So that way I can tell you what I want, and this is not. Yeah, that makes things easier for me. Secondly, how many of you know what Azure Cognitive Services is? A few more. Okay. So that way, I guess this might be a fresh experience for a lot of people, which is always a good thing. That's what I hope for. And I hope you can take back something from this as well. So as per my agenda today, at least, what I will be talking about is what Azure Cognitive Services is. I will specifically go a little further into the computer vision API because that is what I will be using for my demo as well. And other than that, we'll be talking a little bit about .NET MAUI, and I do have an example app that I worked on earlier as well that I will share with everyone. So I hope it'll give some amount of clarity as to what these technologies can let you do for your own applications. So firstly, when we looked at the session title, which was building AI-enabled applications with .NET MAUI and cognitive services, I think the first topic that we saw was cognitive services. Cognitive services is definitely going to be at the heart of this. We had a few folks who raised their hands for when I asked, they know about cognitive services, right? Can you just raise them once again? So would you like to share, if you are aware of this technology, then what cognitive services is in your understanding?
I heard there's a service like cognitive, but I didn't had much idea. But in the previous session, the guy gave introduction about we can recognize the text and other stuffs from using this cognitive service. So you can build a pretty smart apps using the services, using these services with just a handful of code. Yeah, I'm pretty fun.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Anyone else as well? Yeah.
Yeah. So cognitive services, basically, there are a lot of services bundled and provided by Azure, like vision, language. There are many to count on.
Yeah.
So it's like at this point of time, also there are some websites where you put in an image, it can tell you which classification it is, whether it is Bill Gates image or not. It can identify as well. Same way with the speech. It can convert speech into a text to speech, and a lot of translation also can do. So a lot of AI models are converted into service. That's where it's called as cognitive service.
Thank you. That was definitely very close to what exactly it is. Now, when we hear Azure Cognitive Services, the first thing to understand is that when we refer to cognitive services, we are actually talking about cognitive abilities that let us interact. Or in the real world, if we talk about our own cognitive abilities, those are abilities that let us interact with the rest of the world as is, whether we refer to seeing or hearing or reading, learning. So cognitive services is actually a set of services that we have within Azure that do provide cognitive abilities to your applications. And the thing about these is that these are available ready out of the box, which means you do not have to train these. You do not have to build these models yourself. These are a set of functioning APIs and services available for you to consume, right? And when we talk about these services, yes, of course, these are cloud-based. These are delivered through Azure. But the good thing is that with tech like this, you don't need to have AI knowledge or rather AI development knowledge to build AI-enabled solutions. Some of these services, as Sir mentioned here, included speech, language, and so on. When we talk about this suite, we have a few more that I will be sharing more about. Now, the big advantage here of cognitive services is that, yes, you will get already pre-trained models, which do allow some amount of customization. Some of them, yes, will allow you to further train on top. Some of them you will be working with out of the box. But the big thing is that these are pre-trained. These are ready to use as soon as you've created those resources on your Azure portal. Secondly, you can deploy these anywhere. Of course, these are, considering these are available on your Azure account, they are available across regions. You can deploy them wherever you like as per your convenience. Thirdly, as I mentioned already, you do not need an expertise in ML or AI to build these. These are available as APIs. So as long as you know how to consume a REST API or to use an SDK in your preferred language, you're good to go with this. And finally, yes, these do comply to Microsoft's standards for responsible AI, which is very, very important, right? Because it is only in today's world where we're seeing AI grow to a point where you need to understand ethical standards, inclusive standards for what's right, what is wrong, and what is fair all across for people anywhere in the world. So yes, these are built keeping in mind these responsible AI standards and ethics that Microsoft has set. Now, as we were talking about the categories, there are a few different categories of services within the cognitive services suite. The first one is vision. The vision set of services lets your application, it gives your application to analyze images or effectively the ability to see, right? This would include their computer vision API, which would let you read from images, whether it's getting text, it would let you perform image analysis, getting tags, creating captions, descriptions. It also features a face API, which allows emotion detection or, in fact, even facial recognition, as long as you have the data. It also has a custom vision service, which actually lets you train your own models for a specific set of images on top. So that is one of the customizable services that is available within cognitive services. The second one we've got is speech, allowing it to read off, right? Speech to text, text to speech in different languages, helping you, translate that as well. That is an ability that the speech and, well, in conjunction with the language service provide. The language service specifically is focused around, language processing, language learning. So your bot services, like if someone's used Louise in Azure to create chatbots, or if again you've used their translation APIs, those are definitely APIs that are part of this specific suite within cognitive services. You've got the decision API then, which helps you, like for example, the decision API is going to be involved in adding logic beyond, right? What to do next within your applications. And that, of course, includes a few other services as well. Like I do believe Azure has a service for detection of like problematic images, or if you want to create customer experiences or so on, and you want a classifier for that purpose. So the decision set of services includes some of those offerings. We've got search, which actually incorporates a lot of Bing's services. The search service will include some of Bing's image APIs or their search APIs, and Bing has quite a range there as well. Lastly, we've got the OpenAI service set as well, which includes ChatGPT's models, the GPT-3, GPT 3.5, GPT-4 now as well, Dolly 2. OpenAI's set of services, the GPT suite, is a part of cognitive services right now as well. Now, that was a little bit a brief intro to what cognitive services was. The next piece of tech that we had was .NET MAUI, as I had mentioned earlier, right? We had a couple of folks who were aware of what .NET MAUI is. I think Zamir was one. Would you like to share with our audience here, in your words, what MAUI is?
The most simplified version would be it's a cross-platform framework where we can build applications for all platforms, not limited to Windows, Microsoft. We can build mobile apps as well, including web.
That's actually perfect. That's, simple answers work better always. So that's great. Had anyone ever used or heard of Xamarin in the past? Well, MAUI is the successor to Xamarin in today's date, right? When we talked about Xamarin, it was a cross-platform application framework that let you use a shared code base with C# and XAML, right? Now, this, of course, was initially created as its own product, as its own organization. It used Mono, which meant it was dependent on .NET Framework. It was acquired by Microsoft, but the eventual goal here was to ensure that we can have one common code base for .NET. And so MAUI is the latest step in the efforts to bring together these different .NET-centric SDK solutions products that Microsoft has. So MAUI stands for Multi-Platform Application User Interface, and it does exactly what was mentioned. It lets you build applications across different operating systems, different platforms using a single code base, and that includes Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android. In fact, right now, you could actually build hybrid applications as well with MAUI, because we now have Blazor bindings available within MAUI as well. So something like an Electron application, for example, you could build an equivalent with .NET today, which makes it immensely powerful, right? Because from a business purpose as well, having a cross-platform application framework, the biggest benefit that gives you is that it does substantially decrease your development time. Also, secondly, because yes, if your teams have common knowledge of .NET already, this simplifies your experience. It helps you get started faster, work more rapidly, right? Because it brings all the goodness of .NET. It is very well a part of the .NET SDK, which means you can use the CLI there. It's got all your basic services and solutions like hot reload, for example. In fact, even the dependency injection model that it now has is very similar to what you've got in ASP.NET right now. The same style of service containers is available there. So this does immensely improve your development experience and development time. And if you are a team that's working with .NET, it's a great solution for you to work with. I think we've talked about this already, but yeah, once again, it's a cross-platform framework that lets you build mobile and desktop applications with C# and XAML. One difference between Xamarin and MAUI for desktop applications, at least if you are on Windows, with Xamarin, you could generate UWP applications or Universal Windows Platform. MAUI targets WinUI. So if you are working with MAUI, it will generate a WinUI 3 application for you. So that is one little difference to keep in mind. Now, considering we've talked about these two pieces of tech and in a very broad manner, what they can do for you, I had an example application that could help you see and understand what I mean by the sort of abilities it gives you. So for this example app, I will be sharing a GitHub link after this as well. If you do want to try and build this yourself later on, we do have a few prerequisites. Firstly, you need an Azure account, because to create a cognitive services resource, specifically actually a computer vision resource, you can actually generate both. So for this one, you need just a computer vision resource, but you can create a cognitive services general resource as well. You need one of those, A. Secondly, you will need .NET 7 installed on your system. And along with that, my recommended IDE for this would be Visual Studio. Just a note, Visual Studio Code would still not do there. If you want to test your applications locally and so on for building and stuff like that, Visual Studio is still the recommended way to go. But the good news is, because we've got the community edition, you don't have to pay for it. It is available for free. So it's definitely a good option to go. And along with that, you will need the .NET MAUI workload within that. Similar to some other workloads, if you've used Visual Studio, you might have noticed there's one for UWP or Windows applications, Azure tools development, and so on. There is one for .NET MAUI or .NET Multi-Platform App UI as well. Next up, you of course need to create a computer vision resource on your Azure portal. Now, the computer vision tool is actually one that I'm personally very fond of because um, I do appreciate a lot of the vision abilities it offers. It is something I've used across applications. Like, for example, it'll let you achieve handwritten text detection or printed text detection. And handwritten text is still available in a limited set of languages. For printed text, they support over 73, including different localized languages here in India as well, like Hindi, for example. It does support detection of Devanagari text. So it does offer a range of abilities there. It also has a form recognizer. Then there is an image analysis API, which lets you get more information out of images, like getting captions, which is great for generating alt text, which I actually used for another project recently. You can get just tags. It has background removal offerings as well. And there's quite a range and a variety that they have present. So the computer vision resource that way is rather powerful. And it is quite simple to create. I can understand if it's a little difficult to see it on the screen right now, but that's basically a snippet of how your Azure page looks. So as long as you can set up a resource group for yourself, as long as you can select a name, it does have a free tier as well, which you can use for your own personal application. So it is very quick to get started with. Now for the application itself, if someone wants to check, I've got a GitHub link available as well that you can just grab. The QR is available and so is the link if you would like to look at it. That's Global Azure VLR demo. I'm gonna give a few seconds there. I guess everyone's okay. So that there is a link of the project that I wanted to showcase. And while I do have a couple of code samples up there, this will help you help you look at the code for yourself as well. Now, if you have opened it on your GitHub in your browser or your GitHub application, the first thing you will see, of course, is a project structure, right? Where there will be a solution file, your README, and a couple of other things. And then there's a folder, Global Azure BLR demo. To follow along with this code base, you should enter that directory because that is what contains our MAUI application, right? So what the structure there has is very similar to the scaffolded template, which is something I intentionally maintained for the purpose of this demo, so it's a little easier to understand. So the main page.xaml and the main page.cs are the files where the mass of our code is for this particular demo. In the future, for larger applications, you can follow more recommended design patterns like the MVVM and so on. I just did not for this particular demo because it was a smaller demo. Secondly, there will be a helper folder there, which you should also look at because that will help you build the application for yourself later on. All right. So, and thirdly, yes, there will be the platforms folder with your OS specific files, which I will get to just as we go forward, because we do have a slight importance there from a permissions perspective. So if you look at the main page.xaml file, that actually features the UI that I have shown here, which I kept intentionally simple for this demo. It's just a heading with an image here because we are using the computer vision resource specifically for text detection. And for that reason, I wanted to keep it simple enough to understand. We've got one button to capture a picture, which clicks a picture through this application, and one to extract text, which will basically take this image and send it into the computer vision API to grab any text detected from it. You can look at the XAML layout at your own convenience as well. But because I kept it simple enough, it should be fairly easy to understand. Then secondly, of course, the next thing is for the computer vision resource, you have to be able to capture the image. Now, if you enter the main page.xaml.cs file, that is the code behind file for this particular page. A code behind file basically lets you write the code for this particular piece of markup. And the function here is actually triggered by, it's an event handler here essentially. So the moment we press the capture image button, this function is triggered. And what this does is it uses one of the inbuilt APIs within .NET MAUI, which is the Media Picker API, which interacts with your underlying OS to capture images. In the Xamarin days, this was actually an external library by James Montemagno, who I believe is a principal PM at Microsoft. He does work on the .NET MAUI team as well. In case you want to learn, he's actually got a series on the .NET channel that you can look at as well. And he built out this library initially. Now it has been merged into .NET MAUI's own APIs. And what this refers to is it'll let you actually capture this particular image, save its file path, and you can use that file path later on for your purposes, which is something we will need to do. And additionally, yes, we do have a little check. It lets you check whether the camera is supported. If it is on each particular OS, it will let you capture the image, get the stream information, get the memory stream out of it, and then you can either save it on your device, you can load it within the image tag that we have within our markup, which is why if you look at the UI earlier on, you can see that there is an image there, right? That is loaded from this stream that we get back from the capture image function that we have prepared there. And we actually need this file path later on for the cognitive services API function as well. But if you can see, it's actually just a few lines of code, right? And this abstraction will let you click images all across all these different platforms that we have, whether it's Windows, whether it's iOS, whether it's Android, whether it's macOS, which is actually the biggest benefit that a cross-platform app framework offers you, right? Because it's a common code base that you have. There is an abstraction layer, of course, in the middle where you've got this common code base that interacts, that has platform-specific pieces of code set behind it within the MAUI SDKs themselves, and it then interacts with your underlying OS. So it makes setting up these functions and writing the same code for a lot of platforms easy and fast to write, essentially. So the capture image API there, it uses the Media Picker API of MAUI to capture images. Then we have a second function, right? If you look at this UI, we've got the extract text. What that's going to do is once the image is captured, it will then leverage the cognitive services SDK that we have to take the same file path and leverage it to extract text. So if we go forward, we've then got the extract text event handler that you can actually look at within the GitHub repository. It's in the same file. It's in the same main page.xaml.cs file. And what this is going to do is it's going to first take the credentials out of the helper that we have. Now that I had placed in the helpers library. Quick note, saving secret information like API keys is not the best thing to do in a mobile app because someone can take your APKs or your build files and then grab information out of them. So in the real world, it does at times help if you've got web APIs behind them where you can save these as environment variables or otherwise. We do have a secret storage, a secure storage class available within .NET now that you can leverage here as well. But it's still recommended because then you can set up an authentication system and so on. But the good thing is because this is a part of the .NET SDK, regardless of whether you keep it on a web API or whether it's on the device itself, you will have a very similar code base regardless. Maybe the only thing different would be how you're sending the file in, which you can do either as a byte, as your byte stream, or you can send it in as an image URL as well. So there are a few different options you have available. Now, of course, once you get the credentials, the next thing we're doing here is opening up this file to get the file stream, right? Because since it's on our local devices, we are going to directly be using the file stream available, which is actually why we were saving the file path earlier on in a separate variable so that we can leverage that and open this file. The next thing we do here is we send in actually an initial request. Now, the computer vision API actually has a two-part process. The first part of this process is it sends in your information and saves the response internally and sends you an operation location header. The second part of the request, what that does is it uses this operation header and gets back the response for you. So the way the API works, there is a two-stage process, but the SDK makes it a lot simpler to work with. And what we do here is once we've got our operation location header, the ID, we send in a second request where we're, I've added this in the comments, but we are basically going to retrieve the URI where the extracted text is stored. And that can be done simply with the ID that we have already. Now, once we've got that, we need to send in another request again using this ID here, and that will give us the response. After that, it's a matter of just going through this particular model to where the response is. Now for that, there is what these do is they send in a JSON response, but because we're using the SDK, it already has the models available. So it will um, deserialize them into this model already for you rather than you having to do that manually, and it gives you back a result. So then you can iterate through and get back the exact each line that is available within this piece. So what the end result would mean is if you look at your screens, or you can look here. If suppose I go ahead and I click a picture, that's just a page with hello world written on it. Once it's clicked and captured, you just press the extract text button and it will create a display alert. Now, the display alerts are, yes, specific to MAUI, but all that does is it creates a pop-up on your screen with a certain text message that you would like. And yeah, so that basically shows the text that is extracted from this picture. And this would work for any picture pretty much. Printed text, of course, is easier for it to read because those typefaces are available online. Handwritten text, you could find slight accuracy differences because handwritten text varies, right? You can't find every single written piece available, every single person's handwriting. But it does give that to a certain amount of accuracy because Azure's APIs themselves have massive data sets and are trained over a large period of time and are constantly being improved as well. So you do get a fairly high amount of accuracy across most cases. Only with special characters can you find some variations because of how we write them different. But if it's printed text, that's even lesser of a worry there. So that was a bit about cognitive services. That was a bit about MAUI and an application to show the kind of things you can do. And there is a lot more potential there, right? Because you've got all of these services, you are free to use them in whatever way you want. You are free to apply them, whether it's in a different technical stack, whether it's with other languages like JavaScript or Python. .NET, of course, is something we like, but because these are available as REST APIs, you can use them far beyond. And of course, MAUI itself is maturing to become a better framework for applications very, very regularly. For the last couple of years, we've been constantly seeing updates ever since .NET 6 came out, because that is the first time MAUI was actually published and Xamarin was merged in. So MAUI is the de facto way to go if you want to build cross-platform applications with .NET. It is a part of the SDK itself. That being said, of course, if you want to use other frameworks like Uno Platform or Avalonia, you are free to go ahead with those as well. But yeah, that was pretty much what I wanted to share. Now, if anyone has any questions, I'd love to take them. Yeah. Yes. Yes, you can get tags from these images as well. The computer vision API has an image analysis API within that you can leverage to get back information from these images and get tags and so on.
Like this dog image with 80% confidence.
It does give a confidence rating, yes. For the image analysis API, it gives a confidence rating back as well. And so the image analysis API would be a general purpose set. Now, if you want something customized for a specific kind of image solely, the custom vision offering would be a better option because there you can train your own kind of information. So if you only want a comparison against dog or not dog, or so on.
For example, I have 1 million of pictures and your promised. And after will it process and say that out of these 1 billion pictures, 1 million pictures belong to this class.
Yeah, you can classify it like that. Yes. Yeah,
It's more on this UI framework. Right?
sorry.
My question is more on this UI framework.
Okay.
And this UI framework, does it compare to native code or is it like a headless Chrome which is
Yeah. So when you look at MAUI applications, if you're targeting the Android or iOS or so on, these are fully native applications. Yes, that is the case. However, now you can work and build hybrid applications as well, at least for the desktop if you'd like. Yeah.
And in that case, right, like say if I want to build,
Mhm.
if I need to use the same source code for like all the three platforms or four
Yeah.
platforms that it supports, and in that case the UI would be distinct, right? Or like say
Now, of course, you do have platform specific
exactly.
features, yes. However, if you want, you can write custom renderers for each UI element as well. That is very much an option if you would like to exercise that.
Say for example, if I need to build an Android app out of it, do I need Gradle kind of a build system, or only the MAUI will only take care of it?
Yeah, with Visual Studio, it'll handle that for you. You
And
don't need separate tooling after you've got Visual Studio set up.
at least I need a Android Studio or something to.
So you need the ID at least. Yes, the ID there is necessary. However, it offers building and tooling to package and so on. So Visual Studio will offer that for. There are a couple of other ID options that you can look at like Rider or so on, but Visual Studio is available for free, right?
Can I
So
write it in VS Code? Is it supported?
I don't believe yet. The builds are not yet there. However, I think they are constantly improving the CLI, so that would be something to keep an eye out for. That being said, for now, Visual Studio is my recommended tool for this purpose. Sorry. Oh yeah, for cognitive services, you've got all the API documentation on the Microsoft website. So if you just search Azure Cognitive Services, you can find their entire documentation of the website. And that contains info on all the APIs for each of these sets of services, whether it's vision, whether it's language or so on. And you've got information on whether it's for the REST API only or whether there is any SDK available as well. So they have all of that information available along with sample applications as well. So you can find all of that on the Azure and Microsoft websites. Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
Few years back we used to use a mono framework. So is it the base
So
on that?
Mono was the .NET, it was a cross-platform framework, right, that would let you build for Linux back in the
Yeah,
.NET
yeah,
framework days. So Xamarin used Mono, yes, because it was building for the Android system as well. However, because modern .NET is cross-platform, it has grown beyond Mono at the moment. So Xamarin used to use Mono. MAUI uses .NET, modern .NET itself. And modern .NET is cross-platform, so that doesn't become a
successor basically.
yeah, it is a successor essentially, pretty much.
Then Unity 3D also uses.
So Unity uses .NET, maybe not MAUI particularly. I think it uses Mono if I'm not
Yeah,
wrong.
it's-
Yeah, so Unity still uses that. However, MAUI has graduated from there. Yeah.
In a remote application, we have captured in the extract.
Yeah.
First we have to capture it and then we are doing it.
Pretty much because I just wanted to add a clicking.
Clicking, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I just don't want to save my the files what I am trying to capture it, so I just wanted to extract the data directly.
So you can get a byte stream from what I remember. However, I believe a lot of the systems directly enforce clicking of the picture because if we want to use the memory stream later on, it does become a little handier there. So I would still recommend saving the file. But that being said, you can add an extra function to delete it later on if need be.
But but as you said, like we have to get.
I would recommend because we want to leverage that save the image later on to get the memory stream out of it. Yeah. The file reader there is because now if you were, for example, not using a local image, rather an online image, that would have been a different story, right? Where you could directly upload that and so on. But because we need to use the memory stream here, we will need to save the file so that the file reader can operate on it later on. Yeah.
Like what's the basis of
So sorry. Yeah.
like you explained that it differs from handwriting to handwriting by scanning the image. And does it provide any confidence parameters like that?
I believe it does. I will have to double check the response for that. I can't perfectly remember, but the response is a standard style, so you can look at it within the documentation, and that should give you a fair amount of sample. Actually, I'm not sure if it gives confidence for handwritten. It does give you the bounding box information and so on, but for confidence, I'll have to double check once. I can check once later on and get back to you on that. So that should be all right.
Last question.
Any last questions? Otherwise, I'm going to be out here, so we can just chat later on as well. That's not a problem.
So how many of you missed your breakfast today in the morning?
I did until we just ordered an ad, would say.